is session 5. And yesterday we saw how the prophet Elijah had challenged the people of Israel that they couldn't serve both God and Baal. And they didn't listen. And so they took the consequences. It happened at this time that the people of Israel, well actually the people of Palestine, were divided into two kingdoms. In the north was the kingdom of Israel, and Ahab was their king. And then there was the southern kingdom of Judah. And we're talking about time a little bit after Ahab, when Hezekiah became king of Judah in the south. Now Hezekiah was a king who was very faithful to God. We're told he did right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. He removed the high places, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. He encouraged the people to worship in the temple in Jerusalem. Having had a great victory over the people of the northern kingdom, Israel, the Assyrian king Sennacherib began to attack the cities of Judah, and he overran them. Now Hezekiah was not only a godly man, he was a very practical, sensible man. And he saw that if Jerusalem was besieged, they would quickly run out of water. He had a tunnel built from underneath Jerusalem to a spring that was outside the city walls. And so there was water available to the city. And that tunnel's still there today, still brings water in from the spring. The inevitable happened. The forces of the Assyrians surrounded Jerusalem, and Sennacherib sent a message to Hezekiah, and he said this: "Say to Hezekiah, king of Judah, do not let the God you depend on deceive you when he says Jerusalem will not be given into the hands of the king of Assyria. Surely you've seen what the kings of Assyria have done to all the countries, destroying them completely, and you'll be delivered? Did the gods of the nations that were destroyed by my ancestors deliver them?" Hezekiah took that letter and he prayed to God. And his prayer ended with these words: "Now, Lord our God, deliver us from his hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone, Lord, are God." Then the prophet Isaiah came to Hezekiah, and he had quite a long message for him, but it ended like this: "He will not enter the city or shoot an arrow here. He will not come before it with shield or build a siege ramp against it. He will not enter this city. I will defend this city and save it, for the sake of my kingdom and for the sake of my servant David." That night, an angel of the Lord passed through the camp of the Assyrians and put to death 185,000 soldiers. When Sennacherib saw this, he hightailed it back to Assyria. You see, when the people were faithful to God, God was able to do amazing things to protect them. But it was also very important to remember God was working out his plan through all of history. And all the forces of human beings could not obliterate what God was doing. God is God, and he can never be defeated. An interesting thing about the king of Assyria, who'd been so proud of his conquest of the northern kingdom that he'd had it carved in detail on his palace wall. But it ended up with, "I shut up Hezekiah in his city." He couldn't admit to the terrible defeat that he'd suffered at the hands of God. Where culture is loyal and obedient to God, they will thrive. When the culture lives in disobedience, it will suffer. God.